I have the pleasure of introducing the UW Seattle Center for Novel Therapeutics in Addiction Psychiatry. So this is really exciting. It's a brand new interdisciplinary research center at the University of Washington. I'm really excited to bring Dr. Darron Smith and Ruben Blackwell up to the stage. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay with this mic? Okay. I'm Darron Smith, and I work at the University of Washington in Seattle and with the new center that was just mentioned. And we're just getting off the ground like I heard with some other institutes across the country. Our claim to fame at UW is we're trying to understand the relationship between addiction and co-occurring disorders. Now, most addictive disorders have co-occurring something. And so we're trying to determine which particular medicine works with what particular psychotherapy, with what particular modality to sort of enhance and increase the likelihood of successful outcomes that people are willing to, or people can go inward into themselves and are able to appreciate their own narrative. So we're looking at doing any number of things. One of the studies we're into right now currently is we're looking at race-based trauma and trying to understand whether or not these entheogens will help with large sets of communities of color. We don't know because we haven't done any studies much on communities of color. That's one of the things that we're lacking in all clinical research. And this is one of the reasons why Ruben Blackwell is with us today, is to talk a little bit about what the center has been working on in terms of community outreach, particularly with diverse populations. And so with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about that and sort of back and forth between the center, research we're doing, and some of the public outreach. One of the big areas that really needs to be explored is how do we get this medicine to people who need it the most. Currently, the models that exist now are all pretty much philanthropy. But we're looking at something beyond that in terms of with hopefully at one point Medicare, Medicaid endorsing the uses of these medicines and making them available for people to use, particularly communities of color. So one of the things that I haven't heard that I'm very interested in hearing more from the researchers in the room is how do you go about recruiting participants of color in your studies, particularly with the guidance given by the FDA that we need diverse populations of individuals. We just don't have it. So we really can't say or generalize anything when it comes to folks of color. What we've been working on the University of Washington at the center and with Ruben's organization, Ruben will explain his organization here in a moment, is something pretty doggone innovative that I think that research institutes ought to pay attention. This might be a way that we can capture more diverse communities and have more generalizable data that we can actually glean from. So with that, I'll introduce or at least my partner will introduce himself and his involvement with what we're doing.
Thank you so much, and thank you to this incredible organization, to the citizens of Oregon. You all are phenomenal. I'm Ruben Blackwell, and I am from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. That's about 10 miles east of Podunk, okay? And so what I do, I lead an organization that is a community-based workforce development effort that has a network across the entire United States, sort of a collaboration between urbanized rural communities and metropolitan communities throughout the country. In fact, we have a powerful organization right here in Portland called Portland OIC, so I'm part of the OIC Collaborative. We are an entity that was created in the mid-60s, when segregation was ending and when opportunities to diversify the workplace and society in general was beginning to take hold. And what took place in my little town in Rocky Mount is that this organization was brought to bear by Black women and business owners, and other political leaders and male business owners and folks who were leaders in education in every aspect of society to create an institution that would help folk who didn't matriculate through normal systems. When I say normal, what does that mean? Well, through traditionally accepted and federally funded systems of education, and find ways to equip people to be able to fully participate in the workforce, especially in places where racial segregation had been intentional and very clear and very harmful. And so OIC, since the late 60s, has operated, and we've always been able to provide credentialed accredited programs to folks who did not make it through high school to get degrees, to get secondary degrees, certifications that would help break the cycle of poverty and move forward in innovative approaches towards self-sustainability. Well, out of that effort came really the need that we saw to be able to really connect the dots. Healthcare was a huge issue even prior to President Obama taking the reins and moving things forward with affordable healthcare. We entered into the healthcare arena in about 2005 when the very last medical center in the Black community in Rocky Mount was closing. We have a community of about 60,000 people about an hour east of the Research Triangle, which you know is one of the fastest growing regions in the United States, focusing on all types of high-tech ventures, very exciting, dynamic place. But 45 miles east, you have folks who are in a bubble that we're living almost like in the 50s and the 60s. And so OIC was created to break up that stuff. We went into healthcare, and today we serve about a fifth of the population of our community, the majority of which 80% are African American, the majority of which are poor, the majority of which are recognized that we have extreme disparities in the evidences of anything social determinants of health that you might want to measure. So we see the possibility of applying these research in psychedelics as an opportunity from a therapeutic point of view to better identify and equip people with whatever they need to go inside to overcome the trauma that we live in. If you want to talk veterans, you know, I'm from a family, I have empirical data, all of my uncles on both sides of my family were veterans, 100% of them, all of them served in World War II or the Korean War or the Vietnam War. Most of them came back with trauma, but the difference between them and the other soldiers, when they came back, they had to live in a very segregated society that did not appreciate their investments of time, effort, energy, and sacrifice. And so on top of whatever PTSD they encountered because they were there when the bombs fell and the bullets whizzed by, but they also had to come back and deal with more trauma, which is when you're a Black child in the South, you wake up with your eyes and you already live with oppression, segregation, and lack of acceptance. And so what we're doing is really building a network throughout the whole entire state of North Carolina to look at how to apply these psychedelic-assisted therapies in traditional healthcare. I'm a member of the North Carolina Community Health Center Association. I'm the former board chair. It's a collaborative of about 43 health centers from the mountains to the coast. Collectively, we serve about 750,000 people. Predominantly, all of them are poor people. They all range from all types of ethnicities, orientations, backgrounds, and clusters of concern. But the common thing that we all have together is that we understand integrated behavioral health must occur. And when you look at people who are living with extreme problems in being able to take care of themselves, being accepted in every level of society, and who are understudied but over-evaluated, we are being very intentional about making sure that our research institutions within North Carolina are responsive to the progress the University of Washington, my friend here, Darron Smith, and the entire network that I'm becoming aware of. I love the West Coast, y'all. Listen, I'm wrapped up because I have to be. This ain't trying to be cute. It's cold out here.
So, my brother is a new member of the Mycelium Network, okay? So,
thank you.
We're introducing him and breaking him into this right. So, and I appreciated the comments that were made by Shannon. Shannon talked about military veterans. I'm a veteran. And the veterans say hello in the house. Where are my veterans at? There you go. So, Army vet. One of the things that we got to talking about in my work in North Carolina was how can we, there's got to be some way that we can introduce this work into these communities.
Yeah, well, first of all, some of the things that I'm learning in your community, in my community too, thank you for accepting me. But one of the things I'm learning is that some of the traditions of how the medicine, the substance is applied might run a little counter to the openness in my community, and what you're going to find generally with the press communities, there runs a very strong conservative bent, that keeps people's minds closed to the possibilities. And normally those folks who have experienced psychedelics have not been mainstreamed, even with marginalized communities. So one of the things that we're doing in our state is being very intentional with research institutions for including Black communities and other communities of color in their research. Our General Assembly has already approved studies for ketamines and psilocybins for veteran populations, but it's very, very narrow how they define it, because I live in North Carolina. Y'all know that. Okay. So we're really pushing, stretching the leadership that's existing in the General Assembly. I'm in the middle of pulling together a collaborative. I meet next week with one of the largest university research institutions in our state, along with an HBCU. North Carolina has 11 HBCUs throughout our whole state, and we work with 2 of them.
So let's tell them the HBCU, y'all, this is big. HBCUs? Are you serious? So there's 11 HBCUs in North Carolina, more than any other state. What we were talking about doing is, we're actually working on this, is going out and working with these HBCUs, particularly 2 of them, to bring some of their professional students into the mycelium network, to get them trained, to get them doing this work, using ketamine first, because that's what's legal, and then, of course, transitioning hopefully into the real deal when it comes forth, I hope. So we're trying to extend our tentacles and look at other organizations that are out there doing work similar to this, particularly where it comes to training and education, which is one of the things I do with UW, is fortunately and unfortunately, I work in healthcare, so I got to work in that space. But what's become apparent to me is that primary care practitioners seem to be quite interested in this. And so what I'm trying to do and what the center is trying to do is provide education for primary care people to be able to hold space and do this work. And the cool part is retrofitting their offices to meet the demand. So this is where my man comes in. By the way, anybody rich in the audience who's involved in what we're doing, I want to give you props because we can't do it without you. Can't do it without your resources, and thank you so much for them. And we'll happily take more if you'd like. But one of the things we're doing is we're trying to figure out this process. It would involve changing some of his office structures, making them more appealing and more warm, and then, of course, going about the business of training future generations of
and monetizing it. Okay, he's being nice about it too. Because the bottom line is healthcare is about money in America. I don't know what y'all think, but I've established primary care facilities, psychiatric practices, pharmacies. I'm in the process now of creating a pediatric and a women's health facility with psychiatry at the heart of it, and dealing with behaviors for parents that have to raise children alone that are challenged economically, socially, and any other way. So this becomes, as I said, another strategy to implement across the board, but it's not approved yet. And what we have to do is push the researchers to say racism is something that is traumatic and it's lived by and it's legitimate to be treated in many other ways. So this is something that we're leading the discussion in. We're leading that discussion. We need to think about data points that are evaluated as well as outcomes that we'd like to see happen. And one of the things that I think begs to be discussed is that, when people are being treated for whatever their concern or their issues or where they want personal breakthroughs to come in, we talk about outcomes and measurements. Well, what's the societal measurement? If you can get free wherever you are, or freer to be authentically whoever you are to operate better, you still are operating in a larger society where things are really jacked up, okay, for a lot of people. So I also think, while we're advocating for acceptance and approval and support for people to rediscover their own answers through psychedelics in this journey and the collaborations with all of you great folk who are building a construct. We also have to push back on the rest of society and say, you gotta grow too, because the dysfunction is not just on the individual side or some categorical side. The dysfunction is our whole culture and our whole society. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring leadership in another way forward.
So one of the things that might be helpful in this effort too is we've talked about creating a collaboration with various research centers to help to provide them with the communities of color that they so desperately need in their studies. There's no one doing that, and obviously the need is there. The FDA has a guidance letter they put out about this and about how important it is. So in that effort, we're working hard to do that as well. So if anybody's researching, come up and talk to us about that. But the main thing I think that's important to note is that we have to educate the community. It has to be community-based, which is one of the reasons why Ruben's organization is so important, because it's embedded within the community. This cannot happen when folks are sitting in the Ivy Tower, not down and working with the people themselves. So it needs to be community-centered. It needs to be buttressed up by experts in the field who are invested in helping communities of color get access to this medicine. This is probably the only industry that I've been in that has that at the forefront. Cannabis certainly didn't have that at the forefront, but this particular community seems to be very interested and receptive to the notion that people of color, marginalized communities need services and need access. And the only way to get it, at least initially, is going to be through philanthropy. So with that in mind, the goal is, in North Carolina, is to take advantage of the $5 million that was put up by the governor's office to study this, which is nearly not enough, whereas Kentucky put up $45 million, right? Whereas, the University of Washington or Washington State put up, $2.5 million over a 3-year period. So we need more investment to do more studies, particularly with regards to communities of color. We just don't have enough. And I know you all are out there, have good intentions. You're trying to do it, but you don't know where to go. So it might be helpful to consider maybe calling folks like myself and who are in this industry who can actually bring together these important elements. I also want to say something real quick about some of the teaching programs and some of the programs that are going on here in Oregon. Oregon, folks are watching you. You realize that, right? The world is watching Oregon to see how this all goes down. Someone was talking about safety earlier. That is so critical, right? Safety and efficacy and tolerability, these things are very, very important, and government entities are watching those. So how you roll this out here in the state of Oregon really will set precedent for what happens, thereafter. I can tell you right now, Washington, where I live, we're looking at following the same sort of roadmap as Oregon, so I'm quite excited about that. So with that being said, we need more people of color. So we go to the communities, we partner up with folks. In fact, the NIH and SAMHSA, two groups I went to earlier this year talking about this, they were all about harm reduction, harm reduction, harm reduction. How do we get this into the community? How can we make this community-based? And so partnering up with organizations like OIC and also tribal colleges and universities as well, going and seeking counsel from the elders to try to get buy-in. These are things that are all important. And so we hope to be the first largely minoritized entity, right, to do this kind of thing,
Okay.
right, to deliver services to people who need them most, right? So that's what we're hoping. We're hoping that we can do.
Yeah.
So,
Gentlemen, we've got a really important question from the audience, which is, let's say all this goes incredibly well. We build these bridges. We've got this amazing network of academic institutions, hospital systems, and this really wonderful network between the community. And services are being offered and, equitably. And Yet, at the same time, these folks who receive services go back into their, communities, into their neighborhoods, and, more importantly, into this world where there is still institutional racism and there's still all these very powerful forces that might be, still in conflict with all of these amazing experiences and the therapeutic benefits that they've received. So how are they integrating back into these challenging environments after receiving such wonderful care?
Look, this is where we live every day. Okay. This is no mystery to us. We wake up having to survive. And this is another tool to help people make individual gains in surviving. But I see it the same way that we brought healthcare into our communities. When you live in the county that I live in, if you're born in that county as a black man, you're more likely to die than anybody in North Carolina, period. If you live in my county, you have a tendency to earn, as a black individual, 40% less than your white counterparts. Mm-hmm. If you live in my county, you have a chance of having diabetes, hypertension, and all those other things that accommodate poverty and cultural development and societal exclusion. We rank at the height of everything that's negative and at the bottom of everything that's good. That's what our job is at OIC, is to translate for people how to navigate through these systems. And ultimately, my goal is to create alternative systems. And that's why I say it can't just be a missionary-led effort where we're going to include these X% of black folk or native folk, indigenous folk, women, gay, whatever, but we are serious about making a transformation of accommodation in our entire society. We have a workforce challenge in America and specifically in North Carolina. North Carolina is getting older, even though people are coming in at the rate, I think we're about the 8th largest state as far as immigration is concerned from other states around the country. But at the same time, the workforce of the people who are from North Carolina are decreasing exponentially. There are huge numbers of people coming back into our state that have scored high in youth ACEs, evaluations, that are in challenging situations, and those people are completely being overlooked. Well, you're hearing industry talk about no workforce, changing dynamics. We can't find people. The economy is growing, more jobs available, low unemployment rate, which means more companies need workers and workers are looking for jobs. Well, this is an opportunity to slice into that, change some of that narrative, make it better. We need people in power, not from the bottom up. It is not oppressed people's responsibility to fix America. I hope we understand that. That ain't my job. What I will do is equip the people that I work with to use their voice as loud as possible, coalesce, build bridges, continue to push, be vocal in my advocacy, and not ever lie and make people feel comfortable with the status quo. Mm-hmm. And so what I believe we all have a responsibility for, what I want you to have a responsibility, is how do you change that narrative? You got the privilege, not me. Mm-hmm. So I would shift that question back to people in power and who have access to power and who are doing good already. Y'all ain't the problem in here. Y'all are great. My question is, how do we multiply this room? How do we do that? How do we do that? And I believe that if we root our conversation around the medical efficacy, around the validity of these experiences that fall outside of traditional pedagogy perhaps, but that begin to explore opportunities where people can awaken themselves, then maybe you don't need AI to fix everything. Maybe we fix ourselves. What about that? Yeah. So that's where we come from in North Carolina with OIC and the people that we're working with. So we're our bridge between university and academia, but we're also a bridge directly to the folks who run companies, and we do a strong effort in support on social entrepreneurship. I'd rather own my own than work for anybody anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're headed.
Wonderful, thank you. There's so much to
Thank
unpack.
you.
And what an
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So it's undeniable that the war on drugs has had a disproportionate effect on Black people and people of color. And that creates an interesting situation where these communities have been marginalized, and intentionally so, because of drugs and with drugs. And yet here we have substances that are, the evidence and the media are saying these things are the way out. And so there's this, potentially a distrust of the therapies themselves, an unwillingness to engage in the therapy based on the history of the war on drugs. Your knowledge and your immersion in your communities, what is your sense of people's willingness to engage in the therapy given all of the heavy baggage that's been happening over the last 60 years?
Well, I'd say the distrust is real, and it stems from 400 years of oppression and use of black bodies and as experiments. In fact, what's interesting, you raise that point. A lot of what we know about LSD, about psilocybin and other substances were gleaned from the bodies of people who were incarcerated and who were in state hospitals, right? Before we had the current Geneva process we have now in working with human subjects. So much of what we know about these medicines, at least in terms of when they were used in the 50s and the 60s, we owe to the people whose bodies were used to in some of these studies. I mean, one study I read, about LSD, something like black people got like 4 times the dose of LSD that they were giving in the study, just to see what happens, just to see what would happen. It reminds me a lot of the syphilis studies that were done. So syphilis, allow it to just cook and fester to see what happens. It's really, really quite diabolical. But our government has done such diabolical things, and it can do so much more good than it does bad. But it's just, I don't know how we should quite change that. We need to root out some of these larger systems like racism and inequality.
Well, I participated on Thursday in an event that was attended mostly by academic scholars, researchers, government leaders, and leaders of faith in North Carolina, in my little hometown. And we were commemorating the life of the gentleman still alive, Dr. John Hatch, who was the leading researcher back when community health centers first began and still lives today. And so we do a lecture series, travel across the country in his honor. And one of the things that I put out to the physicians, the pastors, the leaders, the folk that were there, was that we got to stop acting like psychedelics are illegitimate and some brainchild of the 60s. These are therapies that have been incorporated into our native cultures for thousands of years. And we're really just bringing back the understanding of how to apply it. And that I think you have to be truthful with people. You have to make people feel that this is as much a science as it is an art, and that it's not focused only for specific kinds of people who believe specific kinds of ways. This is about personal discovery, using this tool to help unlock those things that help you better cope and be a better human being, and it must be therapeutic. And I believe in the way that we presented it, when the doctors are there, the scientists are there, the institutions of research are there, it takes away the power of miscommunication. And then that's when you introduce your phenomenal therapists who have all types of diversity of thought, intent, and experience. I think we have to come out of the shadows and stop acting like this is not legitimate. Just because somebody didn't say it's a law and it's legal does not mean it's not great and it should be legitimized. We have to be the legitimate ones in the conversation. That's how I feel.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Well, Darron and Ruben, we feel very, very privileged to have your voices be such a profound part of this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, and we really look forward to all the opportunities to build more bridges, and strengthen those connections with you over the coming years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.